Hello and welcome to Today in Space. We're back for another episode on the All Things Space Science podcast. I'm your host, Alex G. Orfanos from the East Coast, and today we have a very special opportunity where we get to talk to one of the folks behind Space Hero, which is this competition globally where you might actually have the chance to go to space. So we have one of the co-CEOs, Thomas Reemer. Welcome, Thomas. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Alex. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. So let's get started. What I like to do whenever we have folks on the podcast is kind of break down your origin story. What you're doing today, especially now that it relates to space. Bring us through that. Let's spend 5 to 10 minutes and take us from your early childhood memories of what got you into what you're doing, and then how you met Deborah and started Space Hero.
So I used to watch a lot of television when I was a kid. I don't know if you can relate to that.
Yeah.
Maybe you're too young, but television at the time was really the only source of outside entertainment in the
Mm,
absence of gaming and any other video
right.
source, right? So Bugs Bunny, all the stuff was really my on my cards, and it never left me somehow because I grew up in East Germany, right, which was
Hmm.
behind the Iron Curtain. When the wall came down, I was 18, and I was very happy, never looking back, because we experienced the ultimate freedom, at least for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And when you're 18 and young and you're interested in all sorts of stuff, then it was like the perfect timing, right?
Mm,
I went on to study history and politics because I was very interested in these things. But needless to say that I never worked in those fields because the entertainment industry really sucked me in, right? I managed a band successfully. I had a club in Berlin, a music club, hip hop, the Lucky Strike. It was insane 2 years
oh wow. What year
in the
was that?
90s,
Was it the 90s?
1996 to 1998. Yeah.
That's
And
awesome.
yeah, I mean, we were the people bringing KRS One, Earth, Wind and Fire, Jamiroquai, Massive Attack, all these people to Berlin for the first time.
Oh
And
man.
it was quite the experience for me as a young man because I was only like 26, right? And loved it. And then, I went on the international trajectory. I picked up a study with Paul McCartney School in Liverpool, the Liverpool Institute for Performing Arts
Mm,
in the North. And he has built something of a fame school there. I don't remember the movie Fame, where you can study, to become a musician, sound tech, acting,
wow.
stage design, lighting design, but also management. And so I ended up in this little class of people whose mentors were the managers of the Dire Straits, of Duran Duran, the Happy Mondays, and you like in rock royalty, like
Yeah.
Stone. And it was great because I never had built up an international network, which I did then. And then in 2003, when I was finished, I set up my first international company called Artists First.
Mm,
It was the first e-commerce platform for artists. We had clients like Prince and George Clinton, and we sold the company 3 years later to Sir Bob Geldof, which was an event in itself, I can tell you.
mm,
And after that, really, I had done music, I had done live entertainment, I had done technology and platforms, and I was really looking into the next thing to disrupt, and that was television at the time because YouTube came on
mm,
the market
right.
2006. And I devised one of the first web series that we had here in Germany called Big Fish, Little Fish. We
Mm,
sold it to MTV, great little deal, but I had a hunger for more and devised a concept for an international girl group called the BRICS. So you think the Spice Girls, but from
yeah.
5 different countries.
Oh,
And
okay.
while we were doing all of the preparation for this, right, looking into time zone based voting, looking into
Mm,
mobile video already at the time, 2007, 2008, I happened to travel around those countries to talk to TV and media marketing executives, and one of those countries that I came to was Russia.
mm,
And we have difficulties with Russia; it's all clear. But at the time, it was a different country,
Yeah.
And so at least we thought, right? And so I had this meeting with this boss of Channel One, which is like the top TV station in Russia. And when I pitched this girl group, he loved it. And he said, I have something that I always wanted to do, but I never knew how. And I asked him, what is it? And he's like, I always wanted to send somebody to the ISS on a Russian spacecraft, right? But never knew how to give away this ticket to a global audience. But because of my structure and the stuff that I had invented for the bricks, he was like, let's partner up, let's do this together. And that's what we did. We partnered up for a while, but there was no ticket to the ISS at the time. NASA had grounded all the shuttles and needed to fly with Roscosmos and had bought up all the seats to do all the resupply missions. And so there was no tourist possibility there, right? So we shelved it, put it back, dissolved the partnership, and that was that for a while. I moved to another place to do a platform, music, media, games, and ebooks, little business with Sony and Universal. And I sold that as well in 2015. And then somebody called me from the years before and said, look, SpaceX is coming onto the market. You should pick up Space Hero again, because this time there might be a chance with the first private launcher arriving, right? Okay.
What year was
So
this when
by
you got that call?
2015.
Ah.
So we've moved through my life now in very speedy steps,
Yes.
although it is full of stuff, right? And but by the time, right, I already thought, do you want to really reheat this first love that you had or not? And
Right.
certainly you don't want to do it the same way you did it the first time around, right? So I thought there must be changes. So why is this coming back? Obviously, I'm just like a messenger for this thing. It must happen somehow, right? And do you want to do it for what reason? And the reason clearly at this time wasn't egoistical nature when you want to become the biggest producer on the planet, but you think, okay, impact. Impact is the critical thing here. And you cannot create this impact alone. So I'm going to look for a partner that I can do this with. And bam, first thought that came to mind was Debs. Debs and I, we go back 23 years. Wow. We've been friends for like a quarter of a century. All right.
That's amazing.
And yeah, we went, same circuits, entertainment, media platforms, technology, this kind of thing, conferences. I always appreciated her. She's so fearless, right? And international outlook, brilliantly entertaining, witty and strong. And I'm like, she's the partner. So I called her and I said, Debs, I want you to help me launch this thing called Space Hero. So she says, what is it? I'm like, we're giving away the biggest prize ever. And it's a, space flight to the ISS. And she's like, fuck me. Sorry if I can say this.
No, you're good.
She's like, fuck me, sign me up. I'm in. I've just got one question. And I'm like, what is it? And she's like, what's the ISS? And so what happens, right, is that it pinpointed what we were really up against, because we essentially had no clue about space and the space industry. We always approached it from coming from the media entertainment aspect, right? You understand that if something is really expensive, it creates big attention. Okay, and that's actually ultimately what you want in the entertainment industry. But Debs' question, really raised the big point is like, what do we do differently from the people that have tried this before? Because certainly it's not our idea. People 23 years ago tried to do Survivor in space. There were attempts from Virgin Galactic to do, shows in space and all this. It never really worked. Mars One, the big disaster where they also ripped off people, right? And those examples were always our anti-examples, right? We were like, we will never be like this. We will never overpromise, underdeliver. We will only come out when we have a mission, right? And somehow the lesson must be that even if you have money, it doesn't matter that you can get a ride. You have to make the space industry your stakeholder, your supporter. You have to give them a win situation, right? So that they also see the benefit of what you're doing. And then Deb said, we must learn about the space industry and integrate ourselves with the industry, and then we can succeed. And so, lo and behold, we Googled space conferences, and the first conference that came up was New Space Europe at the time in Luxembourg, a very, relatively small event. And then we wrote to all the 218 participants, and we got meetings with all of them because we were interesting, right? Coming from a very different background. And believe it or not, we have excellent relationships with all 218 still.
That's awesome.
And, that's like 4 years ago, because the industry, as you know, Alex, is very small, and
Yes.
you always run into the same people. Yeah, that was our starting, and that was part of my
Wow.
life.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Now a word from our sponsor. A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, a disturbance in the Force, an intergalactic war rages on. Jedi scattered across the galaxy trying to survive the Groom Wars. For all those left, one phrase reminds them of hope. May the Force be with you, always. On the May 4th edition of this Manscaped sponsorship, you can find strength in Manscaped's tools in the Groom Wars. Be prepared. If you go to manscaped.com and use the code word SPACE, you'll get 20% off everything in the store. Personally, I am an engineer, so I lean towards the tools. There is the Lawnmower 4.0, there's the Weed Whacker 2.0, and the Beard Hedger Pro Kit, which I highly recommend if you want to join us on the beard journey here in the podcast. But these tools are your lightsabers, and you can find strength in them. Resist the dark side to not groom. Manscaped can bring the balance to the Force. Use the code word SPACE at manscaped.com. Get 20% off and free shipping by using the code word SPACE. That's 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com. May the Force be with you. And thanks, Manscaped, for sponsoring us. Now back to the show. There's so much to break down because I've been following this for a while now. I went to school for this. We were talking a little bit about this before, but I mentioning that this is a small industry. It's so specialized, and it's really attracts the best of the best, but it doesn't have many options for folks who don't rise to the exact top. And this show is like completely in that vein that you're trying to give global access to everyone to be able to compete in this. So, and there's so many that have failed. Like we talked about Mars One and these other ones. I mean, I remember back in the day defending Mars One merely because we didn't have anything else at the time. The shuttle was retired. SpaceX was a hopeful dream for people following it online, but for the industry, they did not want it, or didn't think it was possible. And now that it's here today, it like how much of SpaceX succeeding has brought you the ability. I mean, I think you already said it, but like that changed
Yeah.
all of this
Oh,
being possible.
massive. I mean, look, the advent of SpaceX, and also them being so stratospherically successful in the engineering part of their business, right? It's wonderful.
Yeah.
I mean, just watching this, we went to see every launcher and every manufacturer, right? So we went to see Boeing, we went to see, everything that NASA does and all the space centers, JPL. We saw, like I think 30 or 40 satellite manufacturers all over the world. We've been to many launches, right, and many, many launch pads. But the moment we stepped foot into Hawthorne, the SpaceX facility, it was so different, right? Those places. Usually they're like laboratories.
Yeah.
People wear hairnets and all this, right? You get into Hawthorne, it's like a welding shop,
Yeah.
and it feels so strong, right? Because you feel the physics there.
You can smell
And
it. Yeah.
we were
Yeah.
immediately intrigued. We were like, oh my God, this is the thing.
Wow.
And then obviously, right? I mean, look, we are around 50, right? That's now around 50.
Hmm.
And we were the oldest people in the room.
Yeah.
And that was interesting too,
That's
because,
different as
it's
well.
driven by the energy of curious youth. And that's exactly how the world should move forward, right?
Yeah.
And we love the place. We've been there many times now. And SpaceX is a wonderful team, right? And the achievements, they come from, exactly ignoring what everybody else is saying, because, first they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win, right? It's like always
Yeah.
these three stages. And I
Yes.
guess when Elon started talking about, reusable rockets and stages landing back on Earth, people were like, "What the fuck is he talking about?" But
I
then,
was in school having debates with chemical engineering professors about the fact that it wasn't possible. And
right,
it was one of the it was a mind fuck, honestly. Being a student, learning this stuff, seeing people succeed, and then seeing the people that are from the industry saying you're a crazy kid, like that. Those are the people that are working at SpaceX. That's
see.
why it's so driven. Is all those people that were told no, it can't happen, have a chip on their shoulder, and they're like, we're gonna make it happen.
And in a way, that's our story because when
Mm,
you tell people about Space Hero, it's always like, what are you doing? What? And then, you get the really stupid question. It's like, are people even flying to space today? And you're like,
yes.
yes. And then, isn't it data? Isn't everybody going on? And you're like, no. And, is it all these things are coming up, right? And then when they get it, it's like, okay, so why hasn't this been done before? And you're like, okay, oh God. But then, luckily enough, we have a big, 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 massive group of people on this planet that get that. Bam. Just like that, right? You say one sentence, you say, this is a global competition series where you can win to fly to space. And
Yeah.
people are like, oh my God, sign me up. You don't even need to
Yeah, yeah.
say more, right?
Well, and that's what Mars One did. I think that was the more beautiful thing that it tested the hypothesis to everyone of would you be the first people to go to Mars? And there's so many people who would love to be like the pilgrims that came over here to the US, or any place where they were the first people. That's
If
history.
look, yeah, and people, if people make the voluntary decision to take part in things that have never happened, we've seen it today. I
Mm.
mean, we have the Dear Moon mission, right?
Yep.
Which we know Starship, is needs to be certified first before they can even attempt to do that flight.
Right.
It's kind of some time away, but eventually it will happen. But it's not today. People still apply, right?
Yeah.
And so for Space Hero, that means that the applications for something that is very real and that has a mission date will be through the roof. Everybody that would want to be flying to space will apply. We reckon it's going to be between 1 to 2 million people, but some people say it will be 5 to 10 million. Right? You don't know, and that's
No.
the
Yeah.
beauty of this thing is we will be the first ones doing that. So let's learn everything
Yeah.
about it.
Well, and you guys have such an interesting perspective because engineers and scientists are not great at media. And NASA being a public government entity makes it more difficult to really push a great media narrative. So, what you guys are able to do, and what I'm really excited to see what you're doing, is you guys are partnered up with some of the biggest mainstream places where you can get this message out there. And I think that's one of the more challenging things for space events. So, do you mind telling us a little bit more about that and kind of the strategy of like how much are you involving the engineers in the production? Are you guys gonna have segments where we're talking to the people making this? I think the
Yeah,
Inspiration 4 documentary did a good
yeah,
job of mixing that in. It please.
totally right. I mean, um, I can only address it right to the space industry. This is your showcase
Mm,
because you have the chance to say something to a much wider audience than usually. And it's not an echo chamber. Space Hero will be taken in by hundreds of millions of people because of the audacity of it, right?
mm,
And what you highlight and why people are tuning in. Look, we know why the space people are tuning in, right? Because it's space. But why is everybody else tuning in that has nothing to do with that, right?
right.
People that don't care about sustainability, people that have a lot of other challenges every day to solve, right? They just
Yeah.
want entertainment. The reason why they tune in is because they can decide who flies to space next. It is
Mm,
influence, right? And you want to support a candidate that you feel you can relate to, and that is also worth supporting. I mean, let's
mm,
face it, the first space hero is going to be one of the most world famous people on this planet.
mm,
And that is a big task, right, to carry for the rest of your life. Forget
mm,
about being able to go to the supermarket again or do something selfish. If you just want to have a job and earn money, that's not going to be for you because people will look at you and say, hey, we have sent you to space to give us an
mm,
honest report of what this experience actually is and means to us, right? And you have to tell that story over and over again, basically until you die. You need to understand that, right? And when
mm.
you have understood that, then you're the best ambassador to win this because people will agree that you carry this best.
Hmm.
And the media collaborations and partnerships that we have, this will be mass media. This
Mm.
is mass entertainment. This is pop culture.
Mm.
But you know what? Space is culture. Space has
Yeah.
always been culture, even if
Yeah.
it's, not occupied by tech and science. Then you have space in the gods. You have space in,
Mm.
what is the philosophical context of our being. You have space in pop culture everywhere, right? The references are vast. I mean, space movies are, the biggest genre in movie theaters. People don't even understand it, but that's the case, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it is ingrained in us. It helps us understand who we are, and if we can
Mm.
really turn this into reality, bam, people will
Yeah.
tune in and watch this.
Absolutely. I am really excited to see where this goes. Like, so tell the folks about the like how are they going to get involved and participate and watch? Like how does that work?
You will not escape it, right? Because when you want to,
I love it.
it's like that,
I
right?
love it.
People, you see how it works these days, right? These days, it's like less about appointment viewing rather than sharing clips of things that are happening, right? And
Mm.
that's exactly how we are structuring this too. So the real thing is building the core community, and the core community can only exist of, the applicants, their family, their friends, and the fans.
Mm.
Okay. And when you have that direct group involved, you're instantly looking at a group of 100, 150 million people worldwide. And
Mm.
those are just the ones that are directly involved, right? The indirectly
Right.
involved people that are just watching is even bigger. And we have four phases in the project. First is the application phase, which with us is public. Usually when you have casting shows,
Right.
producers receive some application, then the first episode, you're introduced to the finalists, not with
Mm.
us. We want the 24 finalists that we will find after a 6 months process to be world famous already. You're tuning in to
Mm.
the competition with the 24 finalists because you know and support somebody in that
Mm.
competition already. And that is a big difference to everything else before. But it's a wonderful game, right? I mean, every
Mm.
day you have the chance to scroll through new candidates and, vote and, move people up.
Uh,
And that's exactly how you want it to be. And then when the Champions League basically happens, you already tune in because the people on the field are
you're
the
invested.
superstars.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then the competition happens, and that is we call that phase always the American Idol for space kind of thing.
Mm.
And except you don't have to sing. And it's challenge, it's challenges, it's judges, it's
Mm.
behind the scenes, it's this very nice combination of competition but also cooperation. Because space is an
Ah.
interesting thing, right? It's not
Yes.
just being physically fit. You also have to have knowledge.
Yep.
You have to be able to work with people. You have to be able to withstand psychological stress, right? All
Right.
these things. And that's an
The
interesting, makes for
ISS.
interesting, the
Yeah.
ISS
Yeah.
makes for interesting television to watch. Plus, additionally, why have you applied? In the West, we have a lot of stuff. And it means that people will mainly apply out of vanity and
Mm.
fame reasons. In
Mm.
other parts of the world, it's an existential question to getting, out of your dire circumstances. That's your chance. So it's a
Mm.
survival reason, right?
Yeah.
And when you put two groups together like this, bam, you have the conversation the world needs. And we are going
Mm.
to provide that.
That's beautiful. And we're seeing the reality of how privileged we are as Americans with our space program, even, and going back to the moon with Artemis. We have the first Canadian astronaut that was chosen, first person of color, the first woman. But there's an energy behind Canada because it's their person, and like you're saying, to be able to have all these countries to have their first person, their first representative, be able to go or even have the chance, that could be hundreds, if not ever, possible for that country.
Just a little stat on that. You have
Yeah.
between Mexico, Brazil, Indonesia, Nigeria, India, right?
Mm.
Just a few astronauts. India's one and only person flying to space was in 1985.
Wow.
So it's two generations away. Between those countries, you're already talking about 2 billion people,
Yeah.
right? And
Right.
that's exactly the excitement that you want to create. Look, we always say it. We think one of the space heroes will become the president of their country at one point. People laugh. But then you
Wow.
tell them,
Yeah.
who before Ronald Reagan would have thought that an actor could become president?
Hmm.
And people stop laughing, right?
Yeah. It's true. It's true. And I mean, people are looking for a hero more than I think we've had in the last 20 years globally. Um, there's a big lack of them, even just leadership in general. So,
Yeah,
um, it's interesting. I think one of the concepts of the show or the thesis of the show is that you know we don't ever want to be the smartest person in the room. Like that's not. I'm an engineer, but I don't. I'm not coming to tell you that, oh, that's obvious, or yeah, you should know that. It's let's catch you where you are and help you go a little bit further than you already are. With the aerospace industry, there's an unfortunate, and just engineering as a field, there is a feeling of I need to be either the smartest person in the room or I won't even get involved because I don't want that energy. Um, and I think what you guys can bring from the media's perspective side of things to tell a story is an ability that the industry, not that there aren't people in aerospace that can talk like that or tell a story, but it's not their skill set.
yeah. It's not translating.
Yeah.
We went to like I think 5 or 6 conferences, and we're always amazed, right? How
Mm,
small and echo chambery it is because the achievements of the space industry, especially the engineering achievements, they're everywhere. That we're talking on video like this is a space exploration achievement, right?
mm,
And so we need to bring this home to more people. Also, we always say that space is the most inhumane environment that you can develop things for, right? No oxygen, no water, a
mm.
lot of solar radiation, and you cannot dispose of waste easily.
Yeah.
Which means if you apply this to our planet, all the technologies, right, it can
Mm,
only be sustainable without even talking about it. And that's also what we want to hone in on the show is
mm.
without talking about it is you apply technology that has been developed for space on Earth.
Yeah.
And if you then make this sexy and cool, right, people will just fly onto this without the word climate change even being muttered, right?
Right.
That's the point.
Right. Right.
It
You
needs
don't
to
even
be
have
cool
to. Yeah.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
It needs to be cool stuff, and then people will absolutely switch to that.
Is this more of a branding problem for space than anything else?
Yeah, it is, and we will hopefully promote the rebranding of space
Mm,
into a bigger, wider mainstream audience so that it becomes more accepted. You can't rely on government money forever.
yeah. Yeah. You have a unique experience to have that perspective. Yeah. What about the introduction of like the intermediary of SpaceX? How has that changed the dynamic with working like with NASA and folks like that?
A lot because obviously they are pushing the boundaries, from SpaceX's side
Mm,
massively, and but I like the way they push these things because they are confident and they're
mm,
confident with portfolio because they have
yes.
demonstrated what is possible, right? And
Mm,
it's basically, I mean, they're so fast in what they do compared to the rest of the industry. It's quite remarkable,
mm,
and we really want to support SpaceX in the way that we are generating, becoming a reoccurring revenue customer for them, because
right.
obviously NASA is paying for a lot of stuff, and space travel still is very expensive, especially on the human side, right? The prices
Right.
come down on the satellite side permanently, but human side is still difficult. And so we need to demonstrate that we can do this together and support SpaceX all the way.
Mm. All right, folks, we take another break on the podcast to talk about our new sponsor, Caldera Lab. And as we live in the age of potential alien abductions, and who knows, if you do meet an alien, you want to put on a good first impression, especially since your dermis, your skin, is your largest organ. That's all we have to go for us, man, you know? So, Caldera Lab offers the full spectrum of skincare that is backed by pharmaceutical grade science, and they're using nature's purest and most potent ingredients. When the aliens observe us, right? First contact, you're face to face. They're probably going to analyze what's on your face. And if you're coming in there with a bunch of plastics on there, and I mean, what does that say about how humanity treats themselves. Put your best face forward and go to Caldera Lab, use code SPACE, and get 20% off of their best products. So I was able to use the Regimen bundle, which is a twice-a-day routine to transform your skin. Inside the bundle, you'll see the clean slate, the base layer, the good. The clean slate's where you start off during the day, you clean your face. I do that in the shower. Then the base layer comes next. It's a nutrient-dense, fortifying moisturizer, hydrates your skin and absorbs fast. And honestly, there's a bunch of guys out there. Look, we all see you. I've been a part of this. You're wearing black that day. You're getting a bunch of flakes going on. You know why? It's because your skin is not being taken care of. So you can also use things like the Good, which is your go-to at night before bed and clinically proven multifunctional serum that helps your skin look tighter and smoother and puts on the best face for your new alien friend. So be ready for first contact. Be a good human specimen and go to Caldera Lab, use code word SPACEX for 20% off, and do it right. Thank you, Caldera Lab. Let's go back to the show. How are the engineering and scientific aspects of space travel going to be incorporated into the show? Are there going to be certain team members that are interviewed, or how do you see that going?
So obviously, the candidates will have to solve technical challenges, right? That's
Mm,
one thing, one access point where technology can come in. Then the second thing is putting the mission together, because let's face it, outside of the media spectacle that this is, it is still a space mission that we are
yeah,
conducting.
it's a
And
village.
that means we have to treat it with the seriousness that it deserves, because those missions are still rare. And every mission has to count towards the progress of humanity being able to fly to space regularly and easily, right?
Mm,
And so this is the task that we have. So we are putting together, the data set that we can provide. We are putting together the experiments that we can do in the small window that we have. We're putting together the first live stream from space, right? And while this
yeah.
might not be a scientific event, it is important to communicate directly from space while flying or while orbiting what's happening,
Yeah.
right? This will be groundbreaking for many people, and we will make sure that universities, schools, can tune in to really
Mm,
pass this experience on firsthand to the people that are creating the future.
mm. Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, again, talking about an infrastructure thing, and you guys have seen the sea change, but there's still so much that needs to be done from an infrastructure perspective, like communicating in space. There's a lot of that, but to do it reliably and no loss and live streamed is a challenge. And it's cool that you're bringing this much attention because then it deserves the investment into the abilities to be able to do that. Because as soon as, well, I'm sure you guys will get it down, but if you guys start to live stream and the connection cuts out, it's going to be a lot of people who are going to be saying, we got to fix this.
Yeah, and that's exactly it, right? And we are totally aware of that because we already know the 24 hours schedule of dropping out and on, and where it's going to occur, because we're already working on it actively,
Wow.
right? In the
Yeah.
beginning, we will bridge those seconds of outing with virtual programming.
Mm.
So what you will see is a combination of a virtually scanned room, 3D scanned room, and then you
Mm.
replicate the environment in a photoreal sense, right? So that as the
Mm.
audience, you probably might not even realize that there was an outing, because the tracking data still gets transported, right? Even through the
Interesting.
outages. And
Yeah.
that's how you can solve it for now.
For now, that's very cool. That's very cool. Um, how, so with your music background, um, how do you feel about the selection of choosing an intro song or like developing that kind of production, like the you're coordinating the feel of the whole thing, like how much thought have you put into that so far?
A lot of thought, because a lot, yeah, because music is at the heart of what we do, right? And I mean, we've seen the music industry in all shapes and forms, right? Because in the 90s, it was at its peak. And then it went down with the digital interference of Napster. And when you
Mm.
look at blockchain, for example, today, if that technology would have existed 25 years ago when Napster arrived, the whole course of the music industry would have taken a different path, right?
Yeah.
And
Wow.
but it wasn't. So they had this dramatic slump
Mm.
only to reinvent itself, right? To be more artist focused, and now you have a very good and healthy environment. But it's the emotional, aspect and attachment that you want from the music,
Mm.
because we look at music from an impact point of view, right? If we do a global show, there is the chance to introduce the globe to global entertainment. But
Mm.
of course, it's for anybody it would be hard to watch something that they cannot relate culturally. So
Mm.
the only way to do this, you have to combine these things, right?
Yeah.
And there are global superstars for a reason because there is a formula of how music is produced. But then if you mix it in with local colors, that's what we want to honor to
Mm.
give it the global message that we have, right? And for sure, there will be one spin-off of Space Hero will be the first band in space, the first DJ in space, and the first, conductor in space. All
Wow.
these things because we want to find aspects of audiences that are interested in various aspects of these things. And once you have access to human spaceflight and you can do this as often as you want.
Yeah. Well, there's so many, one of the early ideas we came to with the podcast was that really any job that's here on space or career or whatever has its place in space in its whole different form, whether you're a plumber to, an artist. You have your terrestrial side and you have your extraterrestrial side. I think that's Dear Moon, right? That's essentially what they're trying to do is showcase how do these artists change or how does their art change or be influenced by this trip around the moon. It kind of sounds like almost like every contestant might end up having their own version of their own theme song for the local color for the place. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's always, it's a big challenge to look at a global thing because
Yeah.
there's no such thing as one global thing, right? It's
Mm.
um, having a lot of people agree on one thing is difficult already, but having hundreds of millions of people
Mm.
agreeing on one thing is even more difficult. But on the other flip side, you have the feeling that you can unite many people behind this humongous task of
Mm.
finding somebody that should represent us, right? And
Mm.
that's worth exploring because we all have a mobile phone, but we don't use it for global exercises. It's all
Mm.
nationalized, and you rarely venture out of these things. And we need to change that because a lot of people are afraid of the future because they have the feeling they're isolated where there's less isolation today than there has ever been before. The connectivity is there. Technically, it's not an issue, right?
Mm.
But culturally, we need to start using this and understanding
Mm.
it a lot better. And that's where we want to revolutionize the thinking on these things. How do you address elections? How do you address, global challenges? How do you
Mm.
address the national versus the global thing, right? It needs
Mm.
reinterpretation. People love the national aspect of their things because it's their culture they can identify with. It gives them a sense of security, right?
Sure.
Everything outside of that is dangerous, right? And but it's
Yeah.
actually not. We have a very small planet in a big, vast ecosystem that is space.
Yeah.
And as far as I can see, there's nobody there to save us yet from the outside. So we have to do this ourselves.
I love that message. Yeah, I can relate to that's probably part of my journey as well. I grew up in a Greek Orthodox family that came here to the U.S. and I understand national pride and being Greek. Um, and the on the opposite side of things, the fear of anything that isn't especially from the Orthodox the original that isn't the what we started with and I'm obviously on a different path but I agree. I think so many people go into technology and online with their own thought process of what it is instead of assumptions. um, and I mean this podcast, I mean I'm talking to you today. This wouldn't have happened if I hadn't taken the journey to say I don't know what I'm doing here. Let me learn from somebody else. Do you have any like philosophical or you mentioned culture? Are there any people that you look to or were influenced by that kind of influences your own take on that?
I think too many to just talk about them
Yeah.
here. I'm a voracious reader, and I love the fact that although I've never worked as a historian, it helps me understand things a lot better, right? And to
Mm,
estimate where things going. And also, when you study these things, you train to, read in a specific way and get information in a specific way. But I guess it's with Einstein. That's where I am, right? Because
mm,
you say with your Greek Orthodox background, right? I grew up in a family that were communists,
mm,
and I was a young kid. My grandfather was already a communist, so everybody like staunch believer, right? That things can be a lot better. But then obviously it failed for reasons that were overwhelming people, right? And the higher consciousness is a hard thing to do. It
mm,
requires a lot of discipline, and if you don't get the equivalent back in your real
mm,
lifetime, then it's hard to maintain. Okay, it's not a good trade-off, and especially in the communist or socialist countries behind the Iron Curtain,
mm.
they didn't give back. I mean, we didn't have great food, we couldn't travel, like all this kind of stuff. And
Right.
you're like, okay, why is this happening? So as a kid, I was already questioning this stuff, right?
Yeah.
And my family was not talking to me for a long time, especially after the wall came down, especially when I started to become entrepreneurial and make money. They
Oh.
were like, what the fuck's going on here, right?
Mm,
What do we do wrong? But they didn't do anything wrong. It's like,
yeah.
um they taught me that the belief in one thing is nothing bad. If you believe in a thing, it gives you power, gives you strength, right? But you shouldn't do it to follow a dogma. You should do it to understand things better and get strength,
Mm,
right? And
mm,
the Einstein thing that I mentioned earlier is, for me, the universe exists. And Einstein, I think, at one point said, like, it's not word for word, but similar, that, God is basically the laws of physics
mm,
all put together, and the stuff that we don't understand in between, that's the universe. And I
mm.
totally subscribe to that because obviously you can't explain everything. And, even if you try to be a scientist doing that, there will be things that, you don't understand, we don't understand. And but still, it all hangs together. That's the fundamental existential understanding.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Um, yeah, Einstein is also influenced. Uh, he's such an interesting scientist for an age of chaos, and I think
That's right.
that's where I connect a lot with him now, with everything going on. And it's interesting because uh, there's a space conundrum that every time there's progress in space, the world seems to be on the downhill. Um, I don't know why that is, but it is there, and for some reason we're repeating it again. Um, what's your take on that kind of idea, that repeating?
It's a spot on analysis, Alex. And I know exactly what you're referring to. When rockets flew for the first time, it was World War II, and the rockets were developed by Wernher von Braun for the, German Nazis. And then when we were trying to go to the moon, right, it was Vietnam and, everything else shattering Western beliefs in 1968 with the student movements, etc.
Yeah.
And now, we're coming back into the, one of the biggest conflicts that the world has ever seen is because we are getting from one monopolar world into a bipolar structure again,
Mm,
right? With power structures moving and shifting. And I guess the reason for that is, and why space is accelerating those times, is because the people that do it, they understand that it is the biggest aspiration and source of hope for
mm,
everybody. And that's why you push it strongly, and especially times like this. When there's peace and everything's fine, you essentially don't need it.
right. And like creativity now, as
Yeah.
dark as the world has become, it's been very fruitful. But I guess that comes with the
Yeah, it's not
territory.
that totally, and it's not that dark. I mean, people always say that and the media and blah blah blah.
Yeah,
But ultimately, everything's better than it used to be 100 years ago or 1,000
I
years
agree.
ago, for
You know,
sure.
it's interesting. I agree with that analysis of the world. But I know that a lot of people believe it, and it's very quantum. You know that you can make your reality miserable if you believe that it is miserable. Um, so yeah, there's a lot of work that I do for myself, like finding Wim Hof online and
Mm.
deep breathing exercises to manage my anxiety has been tremendous. But it really does take someone saying that you know, I want to make a change. I don't know, and I think that's the more scientific thing than I know everything. It's I don't know, but I'm gonna find out.
And I love that you're saying that because obviously, with the podcast that you're doing here, you have found a channel
Mm,
to counter your anxieties, right? Because
mm,
how you do this is I don't know enough. I want to know more. I want to hear other people's perspective on these things
yeah.
in an informed conversation, and that will help you as well to learn more and overcome this and gain new energies, right? To
Mm,
deal with the anxieties that you have, and channeling emotions is a critical thing for
mm,
anybody, right? And I see that generations, my kids, right, 22, 24, and
mm,
25, and I mean, so self-aware, right, that
mm,
it's painful for us as older generations because
mm.
we are like brutal compared to them, right? And and but the self-awareness, is of course there because there's so much information there, right?
Mm,
You know a lot more about the world than we have ever known,
mm,
and it's hard to deal with this. Of course, you become more sensitive towards things. And I
mm,
think that's not a bad thing because also the concepts of you and the future coming
mm.
out of that generation are very interesting. And, they need to figure out how to deal with this. We can help. We
Yeah.
can help by raising the attention and the awareness. And we can help also with, the energy that we can channel towards these things.
Mm,
Uh, but in general, I love the way you are channeling your anxiety into this thing here. And it's a good way and a productive way of doing this,
mm.
also helping other people because people that are listening, they will take inspiration from that too.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
It's been a lot of work, and I have really, honestly grown a lot just through this podcast. And for me, it was the decision to do that was driving an hour and a half there, an hour and a half back to work at the only engineering place that I was able to get to, and listening to podcasts like Joe Rogan and others, the people doing it at the beginning, 'cause I had all that time. Music was just on a loop, and I was like, I need something else. And I remember he was always saying, if you think you can do it, do it. And I was one of those people that
There you
took that
are.
advice. So, whatever you think about Joe, but he definitely,
Oh, no. Yeah.
yeah, he's definitely a huge inspiration. And then like Neil deGrasse Tyson putting his foot into the water, so we had I mean, no one can replace Carl Sagan, but to have our own version of a science communicator, was so, beneficial. And it's funny because now that I don't want to copy accidentally anything that anyone else is doing in this arena, I don't listen to any other science communicators. Um, because I'm just so worried, just like a stand-up comedian. I don't want to like use a joke and think it's mine, and then I ended up stealing it because I heard it from somebody. So, yeah, it's a creatively, I mean, it's a beautiful thing. I used to be a jazz musician, a trumpet player.
Ah,
Um,
I'm a
Playing big
drummer. So,
band,
yeah, there you
yeah, big
go.
band pieces like Duke Ellington, and um, then also in
Wonderful
marching
music.
bands. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. For music for me is performing was the thing that I was missing, and so this is that. It's very cool.
It will probably look, I mean, I can't wait for us to meet personally and
Same.
talk about these things and also party in a way that we all deserve it, right?
Mm,
Because you know, the space hero journey is not only a show, right, that is going to be sterile. No, it's going to happen
mm,
in people's lives, right? There will be
yeah.
events surrounding these things where people can go to, or they can celebrate in a club with us together, like from the launch
Yeah.
until the very first contact will be established from the live stream, right? There will be some time. And what do? We are going to party, and then the
I
screens
love
come
it.
on, and you have the live connection. You say, "Hello, world." I mean, that's what you want to do, and celebration is
Yes.
important. It's powerful, right? And
Yeah.
we don't do it often enough because you're weighed
No.
down by all the news and everything. Forget all this stuff, right? It's you are already creating something wonderful here and something consciously better. We are doing the same, and so are many, many other people on this planet with their lives, right? And that's what we
Yeah.
want to highlight.
Absolutely. I mean, we're human beings. I think that's the trap that and especially the aerospace industry gets into. It's definitely technology. Uh, we're humans. Like we're not robots. And I think uh, we can take the data a little too seriously sometimes. Maybe most of the time. But yeah, I find myself, and I know a lot of my friends that I speak to, you know, the weather's getting warmer. I hope it gets warmer where you are soon. Uh, but like the weather's getting warmer, people are getting excited. I'm seeing people go outside and walk or run at lunch. Like I know a few years ago, I think 2021, when first people started saying, I got to get back out, it felt you could just feel the human energy like building. And this year, I feel that more than I felt in a while. So, an event for us to have fun and be humans, I think, is awesome. I can't wait for that.
Let's make it happen. Bam.
Awesome. Absolutely. Thomas, thank you. We're coming up here at the end of our conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your story and tell us about Space Hero. Um, last words. Anything people should take away? Any last thoughts on Space Hero? Hit them with it.
Yeah. It's a long journey, right? And you can't just build this and make it quick. So, for everybody that thinks that we have been doing this for a long time, think again, because every movie that comes out there is in the making for at least 5 to 10 years,
Mm,
and nobody talks about that. What you will see when it pops up on your mobile screen is the end of those 5 to 10 years, and we are in the middle of it.
mm.
So I'm looking forward to popping up on your screens with Space Hero. That's the next step.
Awesome. Thank you again for coming on.
Thank you, Alex.
Folks, thank you for joining Today in Space. Another great episode. Be well, spread love, spread science, and we'll talk to you next time. See ya.
Thank you, Alex. Bye.